and his eyes skimmed along the vast bookshelf and the handsome brigade of books drawn stiffly to attention there with my name on each, blazing like a panther's eye in the Moroccan blackness. "Done!" he cried mortally, and his hand itched the revolver in a sweat. "Now, John," I cautioned, "what do you want?" "One thing more than anything else in this world," he said. "To kill you and be famous. Get my name in headlines. Be famous as you are famous. Be known for a lifetime and beyond as the man who killed Dudley Stone." "You can't mean that." "I do. I'll be very famous, far more famous than I am today, in your shadow. Oh, listen here, no one in the world knows how to hate like a writer does. God, how I love your work, and God, how I hate you because you write so well. Amazing ambivalence, but I can't take it anymore, not being able to write as you do. So I'll take my fame the easy way. I'll cut you off before you reach your prime. They say your next book will be your very finest, your most brilliant. They exaggerate. My guess is they're right," he said. I looked beyond him to Lena, who sat in her chair, frightened, but not frightened enough to scream or run and spoil the scene so it might end inadvertently. "Calm," I said. "Calmness. Sit there, John. I ask only 1 minute. Then pull the trigger." "No," Lena whispered. "Calmness," I said to her, to myself, to John Otis. I gazed out the open windows. I felt the wind. I thought of the wine in the cellar, the coves at the beach, the sun, the night moon like a disk of menthol cooling the summer heavens, drawing clouds of flaming salt, the stars after it in a wheel toward morning. I thought of myself only 30, Lena 30, our whole lives ahead. I thought of all the flesh of life hung high and waiting for me to really start banqueting. I had never climbed a mountain. I had never sailed an ocean. I had never run for mayor. I had never dived for pearls. I had never owned a telescope. I had never acted on stage or built a house or read all the classics I had so wished to read. All the actions waiting to be done. So in that almost instantaneous 60 seconds, I thought at last of my career, the books I had written, the books I was writing, the books I intended to write, the reviews, the sales, our huge balance in the bank. And believe or disbelieve me, for the first time in my life, I got free of it all. I became, in one moment, a critic. I cleared the scales. On one hand, I put all the boats I hadn't taken, the flowers I hadn't planted, the children I hadn't raised, all the hills I hadn't looked at with Lena there, goddess of the harvest. In the middle, I put John Otis Kendall with his gun, the upright that held the balances, and on the empty scale, dozen books. I made some minor adjustments. The 60 opposite, I laid my pen, my ink, my empty paper. My seconds were ticking by. The sweet night wind blew across the table. It touched a curl of hair on Lena's neck. Oh Lord, how softly, softly it touched. The gun pointed at me. I have seen the moon craters in photographs, and that hole in space called the Great Coalsack Nebula, but neither was as big, take my word, as the mouth of that gun across the room from me. That, my friends, is an excerpt from The Wonderful Death of Dudley Stone, the final story in The October Country by Ray Bradbury. Sorry, the Interlibrary Loan has a nice little lovely sticker covering some of this fantastic cover. And so this is my second book that I've read in the Read Every Book by Ray Bradbury challenge. I read The Martian Chronicles in July, and it remained a 5-star read for me. It universally, beginning to end, with no exceptions, had excellent stories, as long as you don't count the little 1-page, 2-page interludes as full fleshed out stories. Some of them, are better than others, but the stories by and large were phenomenal. This volume had a lot to live up to follow that act. And it does so really well. I have to say, the only story in here that I had read prior to opening this, I believe, was The Small Assassin. I knew that was going to be an outstanding story, one of my favorites by Ray Bradbury. You'll hear that a lot over the course of this challenge, one of my favorites. And I found some new favorites in this book that I can add to the list of my favorites. And I seriously hope that eventually, when I get to the 100 stories of Ray Bradbury, which is kind of a big giant collection that was put out 20-ish years ago, um, feels like it's probably been 20, it's probably been 10, 15. Um, I hope all of my favorites end up being in there so that I can have one volume of short stories to just pull off the shelf and read and enjoy. And I was most of the way done with this. I read most of this in July, and I had a couple stories left to finish up here to start the month in August. And the book was sitting for me in a strange place. It's not quite Martian Chronicles, so I didn't feel like it was going to get 5 stars. I was pretty sure it was going to land somewhere around 4, maybe 4.25. And it all depended on the last couple stories I had left. The last story itself solidifies this as a 4.5. The others were good. They were decent. The Homecoming, I think, is the second to last. Yeah, Homecoming was also a really interesting one. The one before that, The Man Upstairs, was great. This collection as a whole, just some great stories. The Dwarf starts it off with a bang. Next in line is an interesting one involving mummies, and it's the longest story in the collection. Um, the Small Assassin I mentioned is fantastic. The Scythe was really, really fun and interesting. Um, so yeah, I really enjoyed this one. Ray Bradbury is at the top of his game when he's writing short stories. And it shows in a collection like this. So the October Country was one of the first half dozen. I think it was either number 6 or number 7 if you count Dark Carnival as one of them. One of the roughly first half dozen or so books that he released. And this was taking the stories from Dark Carnival, which he wasn't happy with, and kind of rehashing them and touching them up and republishing them, probably with some additional stories. I'd have to look at the table of contents for Dark Carnival, and Dark Carnival was the one I skipped over because I'm not paying $500 for it. It was one that Bradbury never wanted to be re-released as it was, so this is what I have to settle with. And if this was his first true book, I mean, keeping in mind he's updated some of them, but if this was his first attempt, it was fantastic. And even if these have been greatly revised to not look anything like they originally did, considering the Martian Chronicles as his second book, I mean, he had a big career ahead of him. And it shows. His writing is great from the start. The stories are engaging. The writing is wonderful. It's colorful. You get a good sense of characters, of situations. And in this one, the stories aren't tied together by any common thread, unlike the Martian Chronicles, where there's kind of a continuative, not a narrative, so to speak, but a sequence of events that is going on in the background with the attempt to colonize Mars and settling on Mars, and then eventually war breaking out on Earth, and how all of those things are affecting the dynamics on Mars, because all of the stories take place on Mars, and they are largely centered around the humans landing on Mars and meeting Martians and trying to settle things and making Mars more like Earth and all of that. Whereas the October Country, one could argue that it's got a strong Halloween kind of vibe running through there. Not all of the stories have that, but they definitely have more that are suited towards fall, towards Halloween, towards fairs and carnivals and things like that. So Dark Carnival. I think I read that in the introduction in here that what he had planned on being the feature title in Dark Carnival turned out to end up becoming Something Wicked This Way Comes, which is also in the first stretch of books, I believe, that I'll be reading of Ray Bradbury, and that one is a fantastic one. The October Country, this is my first time reading it. I absolutely loved it. So if you like darker stories, not all of them are dark. And dark is very much a relative term. I'm not a horror fan. I don't read horror. I don't watch horror. If these were horror stories, I wouldn't be drawn to them at all. But there are some elements there that would please fans of both science fiction and of horror and of just general enjoyment of short stories in themselves. They are interesting in all of what they do. And the last one there, Deadly Stone, deals with a writer. And, you know, somebody coming from the future, and it's just, it's fun. The problem you get with short story collections, and it's true with almost any short story collection because they don't have a narrative, is not just that you're not going to enjoy every story in there, because that's true, but it's also harder to binge read. It's harder to get into a rut where you just want to read this because I want to get through to the end. I want to finish. It's both a positive and a negative to that approach, because it's easier to just read one and set it down and, you know, have something else that you're going alongside on the side, which is fun. It's great to do that, but it means it's also a little more challenging to motivate yourself to sit down and read 100 pages or 200 pages in a single stretch, which is why it's taking me so long to get through Conan in spite of absolutely loving it. This one, obviously, I had a strict timeline. It's due back 8/3. I'm filming this on the night of 8/2. It's going up 8/3 for all of you to enjoy. And so let's talk about what is coming up now. So now that I've got that finished, I'm going to roll right into the Illustrated Man because I've got this one checked out from the library. It's got, let's see how many stories we've got in here. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18 stories in here. It's a lot more than I thought there was, starting with the Velt. And Greg from Another Bibliophile Reads has his copy out and would like to do a story a day. So starting tomorrow, so 8/3, I'm going to be reading the first story. He's already read the Velt. He just read it. So that'll get me caught up to him. And from that point on, each day we're going to read a story. Some of them are going to be just a couple pages in length. Others might be 20, 30 pages in long, but none of them are extremely long. I'm just glancing through the numbers here. Yeah, none of them are extremely long. I think the Velt might be the longest story. The Long Rain might be up in there. So 20-ish pages being the longest one. So anybody that wants to join us, hit me up on Voxer, because Greg has found me on Voxer, and that's where we're going to be doing our chat. If more people are interested in reading along with us on this, we'll make a little group. I'll figure out how on earth to do that, and we can just chat about the stories one a day as we go through the Illustrated Man together, which will give us a nice pace. It'll let us get a taste of Bradbury each and every day, which I'm excited for because I can't read enough Ray Bradbury at this point in time. That might wear off at some point in time in my reading every one of his books, but I'm excited while it's still fresh because this is great. Fahrenheit 451, which is coming up, I think, next month, is fantastic. Why wouldn't you enjoy the early ones when those are the well-known ones? They're the absolute treat before it gets into ones that I don't know anything about. So they might be equally good. They might be not as good. So there you have it. Now that we're in August, I'm going to be going back to doing individual reviews. I think I like that, and then I'll just do an end-of-month wrap-up. If you want to keep up with what I'm reading as I'm reading it, you can friend me on Goodreads. I'm going to try to do better about updating each night the progress that I've made on the books. In my Discord, I've also got a little channel where where you can rate your reads as you finish them. And so you can get my live thoughts there as well as I'm getting through books, which I'll be posting my rating of this one tonight. So thank you for watching, and enjoy your day.